Our first reader received his bachelor's degree in film production at New York University and his master's in English from DePaul. He has had short stories published in The Thoughtful Dog, Sick Lit Magazine, Chrome Baby, and others. He is currently finishing his first novel. Please welcome to Tuesday Funk, Marcus Emanuel.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming out on a freezing cold night. My story is called A Body in the Water. This is a true story about the time I may or may not have seen someone die. It happened when I was on summer vacation with my family at a beach house in Southern California. The house was at the top of a very tall cliff. On the back deck there was a long winding staircase that you could take to get down to the beach. We did that a few times every day. We'd read, eat a drink, surf a little, and then climb back up to watch the sunset. I was 29 and at a point in my life that I would describe as just fine. Really, it should be described as good. I had a solid job, I was recently married, no major health concerns, but I didn't see it as good. I didn't really like my job, I wanted to be writing, I was worried about starting a family, taking on that responsibility, and getting stuck in a job I didn't find meaningful. I was taking a writing class, but it just made me think my writing was awful, especially compared to the other students. One woman had a particularly brilliant story about selkies, which are these mythical seals that live in the ocean until they're captured by fishermen. Once captured, they shed their skin and become beautiful women married to the fishermen. The story was about one such woman trying to escape back to sea and transform back to her original form. I found myself way too overwhelmed by the poetic language of the story, the themes returning to your true self, the fear of being locked in a false life. The time I may or may not have seen someone die happened early in the morning, after we'd been there for about 4 days. I woke up a little hungover and stumbled to the kitchen to get some coffee. My family was already sitting around, playing with a pair of binoculars we found in the house and looking out at the ocean. "What are you guys looking at?" I asked. "Oh, there's somebody out there." Way out past the break, there was someone in the water. I could see them with my naked eye, but just barely, only if they splashed. The only one in my family that seemed concerned about this was my mother, who was generally concerned about everything. I borrowed the binoculars and looked. It was a woman. She was splashing about in the water, and her movements looked tired. There was a large boat, maybe a mile or two further out from her, and she turned toward it and waved with both hands. "She needs help," I said. "I think so too," my mother said, now next to me. No one else contradicted us, but no one else said anything. Our nervous tension ran through the room. I looked through the binoculars again. Maybe she was waving at someone else, I thought, but I didn't see anyone else there. Maybe I just thought she'd waved, but she was just swimming or splashing. But then, as I watched, she waved at the boat again, with both arms. Then she turns toward the shoreline and did the same thing. Afterwards, she dipped below the surface of the water for a moment before coming back up, splashing. "What can we do?" my mother asked. "We can paddle out to her on a board," I said. I put the binoculars down and hurried to my room. I changed into my swimsuit and then hurried out to the back deck. "I don't think you should do this," my mother said, following me now and very worried. "Mom, she needs help. And what if you get pulled out there too, like she did? I'll have the board. I'll just rest on that and wait." "I'm coming down with you." I shrugged, already hurrying down the long staircase to the beach. I grabbed one of the surfboards that had come with the house, a huge longboard, probably 9 feet tall. When I got to the beach, I stopped to attach the leash to my ankle and scan the water again. She was still out there, but it was almost impossible to see her now from the shore. There wasn't much swell, but each time a wave passed, it blocked my view. "I don't think this is a good idea. You shouldn't go. I'm going to get the lifeguard." My mother caught up to me. "You can go get him if you want, but I'm not going to wait. She's been out there a long time." In my mind, I could see her dipping below the surface of the water and then scrambling back up. "Please just wait." "It's okay," I said and started out. The water was freezing cold. Since there wasn't any swell, it wasn't difficult to make it out past the break, but there was a heavy undertow that kept dragging me away from the woman. I wasn't really much of a surfer anyway. I only did it 1 week a year, if that, and it was difficult to control the board, to keep it pointed out at the woman and moving forward. It quickly exhausted me. I sat up on the board to catch my breath and see how far I'd gone. I was not quite halfway. Looking back at the shore, I saw my mother nervously watching me, her arms crossed, staring out at the ocean. I turned back towards the woman. She was splashing, and then, as I watched, she dipped beneath the surface again. I laid back down on the board and started paddling. My arms and shoulders were burning, and my hands felt like small toy shovels, just scooping at the water as if they were playing. I tried to lift my head and look for the woman again, but, laying on the board, even the smaller ripples of the ocean blocked my view. When I felt like I couldn't paddle anymore, I sat up on the board again and checked my distance from the shore. Despite what I thought, I'd made some progress. I was now very far out. The shoreline to the break was 1/3 of the distance I'd gone. The other 2/3 were gigantic swaths of deep blue water. The ocean suddenly felt incomprehensibly huge around me in a way that only the ocean can when you're in the middle of it sitting on a surfboard. My mother was now a tiny toy figure on the shoreline, and when I turned to look for the woman again, I could see her and actually make out some of her features. She looked young, with long hair floating in the water around her, and she looked like she was having trouble staying afloat. She was sitting low in the water, her head tipped back to keep her nose and mouth in the air. I sucked in a deep breath of air and yelled to her. "Hey!" I yelled as loud as I could, my voice booming over the surface of the water. She popped up higher and turned towards me. "Do you need help?" I yelled. "Yes." Her voice was small, almost swallowed up by the rolling water between us, but I heard it. "Yes," she said again, and then waved towards me. Sitting on the board, I twisted around towards the shoreline. My heart beating in my throat now, I waved at my mother with both hands high above my head. I put 9 fingers in the air, then 1, then 1. I repeated it. 9 fingers, then 1, then 1. My mother took off running towards the lifeguard tower, small, quick steps across the sand. I turned back towards the woman. "Hold on, I'm coming," I yelled, and got back down on the board and started paddling again. I was reinvigorated by a rush of adrenaline. Hearing her voice suddenly made everything seem real. Before this moment, it had just been a bizarre morning where I decided to paddle way too far out on a surfboard, or where an overly imaginative mother and son made drama where there didn't need to be any. But seeing her turn towards me, hearing her speak to me, made me feel like I now had to do something to help her. But the adrenaline quickly died out. My arms were completely spent. I could hardly move them through the water, let alone push against it and propel myself forward. My shoulders were exhausted and my breathing was heavy against the wet surface of the board. I sat up again and looked around. I hadn't gone any further. If anything, I might have drifted back towards the shore. It was difficult to tell, though, because I couldn't see the woman anymore. I looked where I thought she was supposed to be, where I might see the white water from her splashing, but there wasn't any. I yelled out to her again. "Hey, hang on! Can you come this way? Can you swim towards me?" Then, between the swells, I saw her. Her head popped up, her hand too for a moment, and then she dropped back down. "Hey, can you swim towards me?" I was trying to paddle sitting on the board, both hands scooping at the water, but I wasn't moving at all. I laid down and tried to paddle again, but it was completely useless. I didn't have any strength left. Looking back towards the beach, I saw 2 lifeguard jeeps pull up, lights spinning. A lifeguard hopped out of one, bright red shorts flashing, as he grabbed a board from the top of the jeep and headed towards the water. "Hang on," I yelled, still not seeing her. "Hang on!" "We don't need any help. Go the fuck away," a voice said. I turned to find who had said it. It was a woman, off to my left, maybe 50 feet away. She was leisurely swimming the backstroke. I had to check my surroundings again. It was so bizarre. We were so far out from the shore. Who would leisurely be doing the backstroke out here? Was this woman with the other woman? Why hadn't she said anything earlier? "What?" I yelled to her. "Just go away," she said. "Just mind your own fucking business." I was dumbfounded. I looked for the first woman again, but couldn't see her. I looked back towards the shore and saw the lifeguard on his board, knees folded under him as he paddled with both arms, cutting across the water like a schooner. "You don't need help?" I yelled again. "No," the woman said, annoyed now. "Just go away. It's fine. Just go the fuck away." Embarrassment washed over me. We'd been dumb tourists. We'd freaked out over nothing. We'd taken up a lifeguard's valuable time. But I thought of the first woman again. I remembered her yelling yes to me across the water. I remembered her trying desperately to stay afloat, but being too exhausted to. I looked for her again, but still didn't see her. "What about your friend?" I asked. "Does your friend need help?" The woman didn't even respond to me now. She just kept doing the backstroke, slowly making her way even further out. The lifeguard was getting closer to us, and I turned my board around and paddled to meet him. My movements were slow and piddling while he skimmed easily over the surface of the water. "What's the story here?" he asked when we met. I had no idea how to answer this question. I told him what I thought the story was at that point, that we'd seen someone waving, we tried to help, but now I didn't know where she was, and there was another woman who said they were fine. There were 2 people, I told him. That woman there, pointing at the backstroker, and the other one was over there, pointing to where I'd seen the first woman. I turned back to the shore and, exhausted, started to paddle my way back in. What's the story? This is what people, dog walkers, morning joggers, asked my mother and me as we stood on the beach, looking at the group of lifeguards and police officers 50 feet to our left. I tried to explain as best I could. Nothing, just someone out for a morning swim. Or, there was someone swimming out there and now they're missing. Or, we've no idea. Some people looked concerned, some clearly thought we were dumb tourists, some stared blankly at us. Eventually, they kept walking. So what happened? This is what the chief officer asked us, waving us over to him. I tried to explain objectively, to be aware of my own bias. I believe that I then saw a second woman 60 degrees to my left from where I had seen the first, but I was very tired by that point and may have gotten turned around. I sounded like I didn't even believe myself. The lifeguard had come back in by then and explained as well. The backstroker was a known person to the beach patrol. She often caused trouble. She'd had a few choice words for the guard, and refused to come back in on his board or be civil. He had seen no second woman. He said we were in the right to call for help, that the woman, some woman, had been making distress signals. We thanked them, we apologized, I picked up the board, and we started to head back to our house. The chief police officer stopped us and came over to talk to me again. Listen, he said, I need to know if you think there's another person out there, because I don't want to walk away from here if there's another body in the water. But, he looked out at the ocean, trying to find someone out there is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. No, I thought, it's like trying to find a body in the ocean. It's completely hopeless. I can't be sure, I said. The two people seemed very different in demeanor and appearance, and I don't believe one could have moved to where I saw the other in such a short time. But it's easy to get turned around out there, and I was very tired. I can't be sure. I understand that. I appreciate that. But I'm asking what you think. I looked up at him, my arms trembling from the weight of the surfboard, my body shivering in the cold of the morning breeze. I think I saw someone else out there. He nodded, heading back to his team. We shrugged, heading back to our beach house. From our view at the top of the cliff, we watched a police trawler float through the water for the rest of the morning. We spent the next 3 days going back to various things, day drinking, putting puzzles together, listening to music and cooking. We flew back to our homes and went back to work, our bodies suntanned, our luggage lined with sand. I kept the woman with me. I came up with crazy stories where she was a wayward youth who the backstroker gotten drunk or high and lured out to her death. I saw her all the time, turning to me and saying yes. Staring at my computer at work, walking around the city on lunch break, one thought would pulse again and again in my head. There's a body out there in the ocean. There's some girl missing from her family, a mother waiting to hear her voice, and I am the only one that knows what happened. I would scream it out in the middle of meetings on my crowded train commute home. And then, one day, about 3 months later, when the winter was settling in around Chicago, I remembered something. A sort of bizarre, extraneous detail I told my family to break up the tragedy. After I'd first spoken with the lifeguard and started the long paddle back into the shore, I made it about a third of the way before I had to rest again. Sitting on my board, trying to catch my breath, I saw something off to my left. My first thought was that it was a dog, poking its head up through the water. But then I realized it was a seal. It was maybe 15 feet away from me, maybe less, staring directly at me. I looked back at it and laughed out of surprise. Then, not looking away from me, it ducked under the water. It reappeared a few seconds later on my other side, just as close, staring at me just as intently. Then, realizing I was alone in the middle of the ocean with this creature, I started frantically paddling back in. Remember the incident 3 months later, though, I saw it in a different way. A Selfie. What if the woman had been a Selfie? Maybe she'd returned to the ocean to transform back to her real self. She'd gotten scared and tried to turn back, to hide again in human form, but it was too late. She'd gone too far. She had to accept it, to transform back to her true self before she was caught again by the backstroker. And before I left her, she wanted to show me that. Now, when I ask myself that same question and won't stop nagging me, what's the story here? What happened? This is the answer I choose. I don't think it's much more ridiculous than the others. And now, when I find myself farther out in the water than I want to be, terrified, wanting to turn back and hide, I think of the woman. Remember her, I tell myself. Let her be a strength to you. Regardless of if she was ever real or not, don't let her death be in vain. Thank you.